Please sign right here. Let me take a picture of you with the box.
A picture? Why?
It's part of the protocol.
Oh, okay.
I don't need to remind you how sensitive the material is.
I know. Thanks.
Good. Take care.
Russell, did you receive it?
It just arrived.
Good. Listen, priority is to find the real cause of death. Early reports indicate suicide, a drug overdose, but I don't buy it. It doesn't make sense. She was too important and the timing was odd.
She was a lawyer at GoAT, right?
More like the vice president.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. So now you see how deeply in trouble you'd be if anything leaks out.
You're putting me in a tough spot here, Tom.
Not if you're careful, Russell. Just make sure nothing leaks out.
Why not wait for the full autopsy? Why do you need me?
We need to move faster, and if there's something bigger going on, we need to investigate it. This is a one-time chance to catch them. GoAT has been dodging us for way too long.
So you want me to spy on them through her memories?
No, I just want you to find out how she died, which is legal. But if I'm right, it will take us somewhere nasty. I know there's something off. We just need to find out what.
All right. I'll do what I can.
Good. Remember, it's because of these people we're here in the first place.
Well, we don't know anything yet.
We will, Russell. I've been in this for too long to know it's not just suicide. You'll see. So, I've given you access to her apartment on Stratford Avenue. They're about to wrap it up over there, but Detective Stan Becker's waiting for you. He knows you're coming. If you want to investigate the real place, you should head out there now.
All right. I'll check it out.
Okay then, I'll leave you to it. Don't keep Stan waiting, and keep me posted on anything you find.
Sure. See ya. This is not a pipe. The idea was an office-lab hybrid.
There's been a lot of shutdowns lately, and this building's electrical grid is just as old. So I got a backup. I've got nothing to put in there. Development logs of patch 1.2. Probably the most important update to date, and Carl's last contribution to the project.
All right. I have a temporary solution for when Evie can't interpret some part of a memory, but it requires manual input. So, let's say the data was a chair. While Evie can't interpret it is a chair, or where it should be, she's still able to produce a 3D geometrical output with sound, and that output is based on data which does have meaning. The problem is that it doesn't fit anywhere, and it doesn't make sense to her. So, what I did was to allow Evie to still represent this failed reconstruction in an encapsulated manner that we can look at inside the memory space, so we can interpret it. I made a quick interface for inspection too. So, in other words, we can now assist Evie at interpreting the data by using our special human skills. We just have to tell her what it could be and where it should belong, and she should be able to narrow the margin enough to make it part of the reconstruction again.
Question. Is it always about something missing, like a chair or another object? Or can it be a subjective thing that doesn't belong anywhere?
It could be a subjective thing, yes, but that would be rare, as it's more likely to become a subjective entity or part of the subjective environment somehow. Shouldn't be represented as missing data.
Okay.
Can happen, though. Would be interesting to see.
Yeah. This is great, Carl. We're so close. Okay, so reason to celebrate. We can now make an objective reconstruction.
So, it worked.
My original approach didn't, but the machine learning approach did.
These are your memories you're using, right?
Yeah, for now.
Cool.
So what I did is to isolate a memory of a specific place, and then made the machine compare it with real footage of that same place, taken exactly at the same moment that the memory was made. So instead of trying to find out how to filter a memory out of its subjective experience, I just let the machine attempt it through trial and error. It basically iterates reconstructions of my memory by randomly filtering unclassified data, and the random reconstructions that match the footage the most get selected, and a new round of random reconstructions begin. Eventually, the filtering is narrowed down to data that is more and more reduced in size. And after a while, the solution is basically the same as the footage, just more glitchy and blurry.
And did you test it with different types of memories?
Nothing too extreme in terms of emotional distress yet, but yes, all types of memories and places. I've been carrying a camera for quite a while now.
I like it, but I think that you still need a bigger test pool to truly call it objective. I mean, you could be introducing bias by how you're making these memories.
That's true. But currently, the places consistently match in size, shape, color. The sounds are getting clearer. While it's not perfect yet, it's robust enough to be certain that if anything bigger than, for example, the size of a tennis ball appears in an objective reconstruction, and if that isn't too blurry or glitchy, it means it was just there. The error margin is simply too small now.
Cool.
Yep, and the cool thing is we can start classifying and understanding this data now by going backwards.
Yeah, I want to take a look at that.
It's all uploaded.
Awesome, Russell. Okay, so now, besides switching states, we can actually sort of fast travel to different memories and events inside that memory. As we know, time is still an issue, as you can go back or further in time inside a single memory. So, I thought it would be handy to have some sort of database of memories and their events as you reconstruct them. It also captures visual references as you progress, so it will help us remember a bit about each reconstruction, as it gets confusing sometimes. So, this is very rough, but basically what you do is choose a memory from the subject's lifeline, and then if that memory is split into sub-events, you can select them and reconstruct that specific moment in time. It's pretty simple, actually.
That's very handy.
Yep. And if you ever manage to do that objective filter, I made it easy to divide each event into objective and subjective, so they can be selected through here as well.
Thanks for thinking about that. We will make this work.
Well, we've already talked about it, but I'll say this. Even if it doesn't work, we'll reach that truth through subjectivity itself.
Don't let anyone hear you saying that.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Very minor upgrade to the control panel this week. If we discover raw data, then try to use it somewhere, and then forget to pick it up, Evie will know where we left it, so she can recall it. I put a small input there in the control panel to do just that.
Perfect. I'm absolutely going to forget them.
Yeah, I was thinking of you.
Okay, on my side, I coded a small feature this week as well. If you need feedback from Evie about anything, she can now temporarily use more resources to process it. Technically, she will use more RAM to freeze a lot of secondary processes and then continue from that image. And if the RAM is not enough, she'll use our disks. So basically, a lot more processing power will be available for a few seconds, and the memory shouldn't shut down.
Perfect. Great.
Just a quick update on Evie. We've uploaded a few more natural language modules that have really improved her speech. But the biggest upgrade is a module that allows her to learn from us. It does use some processing power, but it's worth it. The biggest gains occur when she is actually on a conversation and being challenged, instead of relying only on big data analysis. So since she's learning from us all the time, we should try to speak to her naturally. Be polite with her. Explain things. Correct her when she makes linguistic errors, and so on. The clearer our language, the clearer she'll be when trying to interpret data to us later.
Is it on?
Yes.
Okay, Russell. I think it needs just a few more days. I could use some testing, though.
Count on it. This weekend?
That'd be great, but weren't you going to meet with Laura?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right. Monday then.
Cool. So, subjective entities. As we decided, the understanding of subjectivity should be handled from different angles to avoid bias. So this particular angle is all about allowing the data to speak for itself, so to speak. I didn't want to rush into applying any concept we feel safe to talk about yet. So I first isolated data that had these characteristics: lack of particular location, lack of predefined shape, lack of overall consistency, a strong, erratic influence on other memory data, and of course that AI doesn't get close to interpret it. So with this data, instead of forcing Evie to interpret something out of it, I allowed it to sort of latch to human and animal behavior patterns. Let me explain this. I mapped thousands of different behaviors into patterns, and then allowed the machine to brute force similarities between these patterns and the original uninterpreted data. If these are found, they can complement each other, because after a while, the data will have some behaviors more suited to itself than others. And with a little push, they can work as a vehicle to express the data. It's still far off to get something objective about it, but it allows for a lot of guesswork about what is the subjective thing that's going on in the memory. For example, let's say the subjective data is some sort of tense nervousness. Then there is a chance a subjective entity is introduced into the reconstruction to make sense of some of the data that has a behavior typical of tension and nervousness. I'm aware that there are layers of interpretation here, but thankfully the pool sample is huge, and the good thing is that we can do investigative work with this. If we analyze the data carefully and start to challenge these behaviors, it can't lead to an objective conclusion, but it can lead to something if other aspects of the memory support the hypothesis that can come out of these behaviors. What do you think?
I love it. It allows us to investigate further without closing any doors.
I knew you'd get it. It's just having a bigger expression range for the subconscious. That's all we need for now.
Should I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so after some serious wrestling with time, always a complex subject, we have a new feature for our time-based reconstruction problems.
Interesting.
Oh yeah. So since it's difficult to freeze one specific moment over a large space, there's always the chance that time variations are too large and that they introduce errors to the reconstruction. So when Evie does find a part of a memory which has a range of moments available, like for example, someone walking from his room to the backyard, and sometimes it's not enough time to make it a different memory event. So what I did, in order to make use of that information, is that if that room-backyard range fits into the maximum time threshold of the event, Evie will now introduce a control that we can use to warp time on that specific object, instead of choosing one part and discarding the rest, so we can see the whole sequence without disturbing the rest of the memory. Thanks.
So avatars are like a quick adaptation of the subjective entity's work. After a while, we've been able to classify subjective entities based on a few characteristics, like aggressiveness, amount of reaction to the other elements in the memory, and a big list that we can go through later. But what I discovered is that some of the entities are fully passive, meaning that they do not express behavior, but other entities do react to them. So they are part of the subjective behavior web, but passive. So what I did is make a small hack to use their influence at our will. So it allows us to investigate other entities.
So we can control them.
I wouldn't say truly controlling them, but we can move them around and see how they influence the rest of the subjective space. It's only a spatial thing for now, but it can be really helpful to study how the patterns react to each other.
Okay, still working on the on-the-fly scanning project. It's still a long way to go, but I'm moving in the right direction. The head needs to be fully constrained, though. That's what I'm solving right now. Just moving a bit slow with everything that's happened lately. Logs will probably stop for a while, until things normalize a bit. No disc uploaded yet. And I can't keep that detective waiting. I need to start over again. I can't believe the loss of performance after adapting them to comply with the new laws. Times are changing indeed. Carl liked to read this nonsense. I never figured out how such a great scientist was able to pour so much time in reading clickbait articles. He once said he could draw global connections through them. I really need a new partner. Hard to replace Carl, though. This was the first thing I brought in here. This was the first thing I brought in here.
My little project has come a long way. This'll take a while. I should visit her apartment while the memory gets ready. This'll take a while. I should visit her apartment while the memory gets ready. I shouldn't keep that detective waiting.
Hey, Russell, right? Tom said you'd come. Feel free to take a look around, but don't touch anything. Let me know if you have any questions.
Go AT's new project. Quite a view. Generative design and automated construction. Their success would mean another tech earthquake, this time in the construction and housing market. So everybody is both intrigued and scared about it. Go AT's new project. Probably her last meal. Probably her last meal. Probably her last meal. The great shaman Poe, master of mirrors, has passed away on his 100th birthday, dated July 12th. I don't think I ever heard of him. I don't think I ever heard of him. I don't think I ever heard of him.
you have the place call? Negative. 7 Edward Victor King 854. 77 Edward Victor King 854. QDL. 4 Bucks for second level. Go ahead with the first deal. Edward 182 2949 lots of DS. Vessel DS. Go ahead with the next one. Edward 286 5435 lots of Herrera. 10 for Ava Brian Diaz of Hudson Park. Valid deal. Somebody from 1. You want to deal with the place call? Negative. 7 Edward Victor King 854. 77 Edward Victor King 854. QDL. 4 Bucks for second level. Go ahead with the first deal. Edward 182 2949 lots of DS. Vessel DS. Go ahead with the next one. Edward 286 5435 lots of Herrera. 10 for Ava Brian Diaz of Hudson Park. Valid deal. Somebody from 1. You want to deal with the place call? Negative. 7 Edward Victor King 854. 77 Edward Victor King 854. QDL. 4 Bucks for second level. Go ahead with the first deal. Edward 182 2949 lots of DS. Vessel DS. Go ahead with the next one. Edward 286 5435 lots of Herrera. 10 for Ava Brian Diaz of Hudson Park. Valid deal. Somebody from 1. You want to deal with the place call? Negative. 7 Edward Victor King 854. 77 Edward Victor King 854. QDL. 4 Bucks for second level. Go ahead with the first deal. Edward 182 2949 lots of DS. Vessel DS. Go ahead with the next one. Edward 286 5435 lots of Herrera. 10 for Ava Brian Diaz of Hudson Park. Valid deal. Somebody from 1. You want to deal with the place call? Negative. 7 Edward.
Visiani Simultanei, a futurist painting. Interesting choice. The original smaller.
4 Bucks for second level. Go ahead with the first deal. Vessel DS. Go ahead with the next one. Edward 286
It's getting late.
5 lots of Herrera. 10 for Ava
Was she going somewhere?
of Hudson Park.
Was she going somewhere? Goes with the style of the place.
Negative. 7 Edward Victor King 854. 77 Edward Victor King 854. QDL. 4 Bucks for second level. Go ahead with the first deal. Edward 182 2949 lots of DS. Vessel DS. Go ahead with the next one. Edward 286 5435 lots of Herrera. 10 for Ava Brian Diaz of Hudson Park. Valid deal. Somebody from 1. You want to deal with the place call? Negative.
Looks like where the body was.
Gizak sleeping pills. You need a prescription for these.
Jizex. It's one of the strongest you can get. Jizex. It's one of the strongest you can get. Bloody footprints. She probably stepped on the broken shards. Vomit. Broken. Looks like something was thrown at it. Another broken mirror. I don't think it's a coincidence. Another broken mirror. I don't think it's a coincidence. Looks like an expensive mask. Men's clothes. Men's clothes. I wonder what's in those boxes. I wonder what's in those boxes.
Yeah?
Who found her?
Didn't you get the report? It was her husband.
What time did he find her?
The morning after, and called right away. The security cameras corroborate the time he arrived, so we don't have any reason to suspect him.
Do you know anything else about him?
His name is Alex. Pretty average guy. Fitness trainer. The victim had kicked him out a few months ago. They were about to get a divorce. He came by to pick up some stuff he'd left here.
Could he have been angry about the divorce?
Yeah. But as I said, she'd been dead for at least 6 hours before he got here. So if somehow he forced her to take an overdose over the phone, then yeah, he could have done it.
Did she leave any children or family?
No, no children, no brothers or sisters, foreign parents that she didn't see much. For now, that's all I know. And a husband. Pretty regular corporate profile, if you ask me.
Do you have any theories about what happened?
It's a little early yet, but everything points to suicide. There are lots of loose ends as to why, especially considering who she was. Her laptop, for example, is gone. We haven't been able to find it, so who knows how deep that thing goes. Even so, I don't think there's a possibility someone sneaked in and forced her to take some pills somehow. But don't take my word for it. We don't even have the full autopsy report yet.
Thanks.
No problem.
Okay. I think I have enough information from the real place. Time to find out what her memories have to say about what happened.
But who, as Cindy Smith very eloquently put it here earlier, feel that technology is something that both can empower and do fantastic good in the world, and at the same
The
time,
idea was an office
gives
lab
new power to
hybrid.
screw up in even grander ways than before. So we feel we want to do everything we can now to make sure that technology gets used for good. If we look at not very powerful technological inventions like fire, for instance, we used a strategy of learning from mistakes. We screwed up a bunch of times and then we invented the fire extinguisher. But with more powerful technologies, nuclear weapons, synthetic biology, artificial intelligence, etc., we don't want to learn from mistakes. We want to get things right the first time, because that might be the only time that we have, right? And the way I think about this is to create a great future for humanity. We want to win this race between the growing power of technology and the growing.
There's been a lot of
wisdom
shutdowns
with which
lately,
manage
and this
technology.
building's electrical
By
grid is
investing
just as
more
old.
in
So I got a
this
backup.
wisdom. We're going to hear
Old,
more in
used,
this session from
but it saved me a few
Pierre
times.
and Daniel and Nick
My
about
backup generator in case of
nuclear,
shutdowns. My backup
bio,
generator in
and
case of
AI.
shutdowns.
But let me start by talking just a little bit about nuclear weapons, because even though I want to end up with talking about AI, I feel that while we celebrate our successes here in the national action plans and CBRN, it's very important to at the same time highlight our failures so far to learn from them when we take on new, more powerful technologies, so we don't repeat past mistakes. And I think that nuclear weapons is a great case study of inadequate risk management. Why do I say inadequate? Since we still haven't had a global nuclear war. Well, let me just ask you this question. Which one of these two people is more famous? And let me ask you a follow-up question. Which one of these two people should we thank for us all being alive here today, because he single-handedly stopped the Soviet nuclear attack during the Cuban Missile Crisis? I'll give you just one hint. He wasn't Canadian, right? So that already says something about how little attention we as a species pay sometimes to really important issues. And moreover, I would say the lesson that we should draw from this is that relying on luck is a really poor long-term strategy. The issue with Vasily Arkhipov was just one out of a hair-raisingly long string of near misses with global thermonuclear war. And although we've mostly focused so far about nuclear threats from terrorism and crime, we must remember that there have been also a lot of close calls where we almost had an all-out nuclear war between superpowers. And even if the chance is as low as 2% per year that happens by mistake, the probability that we're going to screw up then within centuries is virtually 100%. So we need to do better than just hope for luck in the long term. If you play Russian roulette long enough, we all know how it ends. The second lesson I think we can learn from the nuclear case study here is that it's really important to understand risks in advance before you fully build out the technology. And I feel that we epically failed with nuclear weapons here. I feel personally guilty about this because I'm a physics professor. I feel this was our fault, partly, as physicists. So let's look at quickly at the facts. When nuclear weapons were first built, the decision makers and scientists generally thought that the main risk was that you would literally get blown up by it. And people had these risk assessments that if things went really, really bad, maybe we would kill 300 million people or something like that. Now we know that that's hopelessly naive, and that this is not even, that getting blown up by it isn't even the number one largest risk to worry about. For example, this is a photo from downtown Las Vegas in the 60s. You see the mushroom-shaped cloud in the background? That's how close it was to downtown, because people had totally underestimated the dangers of radioactive fallout. And acknowledging that, now the US government has paid out more than $2 billion in damages to settle these downwinder cases, and there have been more people who were killed by fallout from these peacetime nuclear tests than who died in Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. But that's also not the #1 risk, even though it was a big oopsie. In the 60s, it was realized that if you set off one single hydrogen bomb 400 kilometers up above Earth's surface, you can create an electromagnetic pulse of tens of thousands of volts across pretty much the whole continent, potentially permanently disabling electronics, cars, cell phones, the power grid, which can lead not only to catastrophic infrastructure meltdown, but also if you have a long power failure together with all these, with thousands of nuclear devastated cities, then there are additional oopsies people hadn't thought about. For example, if you actually have a long lasting power failure in a nuclear power plant, you know what happened in Fukushima? Well, if you don't keep the pumps on that circulate the water that covers these spent fuel rods in pools like this one, it boils off within a matter of weeks. Then the zirconium cladding on the fuel rods catches fire, and then you get a super Chernobyl, and you could get that. Basically all of these fuel pools, there are 300 of them here, as I only drew little wind plumes around 5 of them, but you can imagine if you do that around all of them, it's just further adding to the misery. I'm highlighting this at the meta level just because these are things that people hadn't thought about for decades and decades while we built tens of thousands of these weapons. And we still haven't talked about even the worst risk that's been discovered so far. Right now, if we were to actually use a large fraction of the 16,000 nuclear weapons that currently exist, many of which are on hair trigger alert, so we could have, if you think of the largest couple of thousand cities on Earth, you could have them all destroyed within an hour of right now. If we were to do that, then our nice looking planet here would, before too long, look, maybe potentially like this, as the soot from the firestorms rose high up in the atmosphere and shrouded Earth. And this was not realized, how serious this would be, until the 80s, about four decades after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And although this had a very powerful influence, this research helped persuade Gorbachev and Reagan to negotiate the largest nuclear cuts ever done. It turned out that unfortunately these calculations were rather inaccurate. They were made on a supercomputer which was less powerful than this phone, and it turned out that they were too optimistic. That more modern calculations done by some of the world's leading climate modelers on real today's supercomputers show that this might last not 2 years, but more like 10 years. And for the following summer, you can see here the temperature drops. This makes global climate change seem like peanuts in comparison. You see in the American breadbasket, Ohio, for example, the temperatures are dropping by 20 degrees or so. That's Celsius, so 40 Fahrenheit for my American friends. And if you look in Russia, China, you get drops of like 30, 35 Celsius. What does that mean in plain English? Well, we don't have to be agriculture experts to realize that if this turns into this when you're going to harvest, it's not so awesome for food supply. And one doesn't have to make fancy calculations to realize that rather than maybe having a few 100 million people killed, as in some of the worst case scenarios that people had in the 60s, it's very plausible that the vast majority of all people on Earth would starve to death and then succumb to pandemics and other things that would follow. No, not great. And the thing to take away from all of this, I think, is simply that this is an example of where we built the technology first and realized what the main risks were way, way later. And as we get more and more powerful tech, we want to learn from this mistake and really understand the threats first so that we can avoid them in the first place. So in that optimistic spirit, let's take a closer look here at artificial intelligence. This is a technology which has wonderful potential, of course, to do great things. And we've all seen how it's been making a lot of progress. The early progress in AI tended to involve, like when Garry Kasparov lost at IBM's Deep Blue, for example, good old-fashioned AI where some human programmers taught the machine to do something that it could then do way faster than Kasparov and beat him. Similar sort of old-fashioned approaches that are very successful now are self-driving cars, and to some extent when the Jeopardy Deep Blue this quiz show was won by IBM's Deep Blue. However, most of the most recent breakthroughs that have happened, and there's been a real amazing series of breakthroughs just in the last 5 years, where things that people thought would take decades to accomplish have now happened all of a sudden. Most of that stuff has involved a completely different approach, where the machine actually learns like a child. It can take vast amounts of data, and using deep learning and other techniques that Nick Bostrom will tell you about, can actually learn to do all sorts of things that the programmer has no idea even how it did it. Just like your children learn to speak your language and you don't even know exactly how they did it. So look at this picture, for example. This is something that was science fiction 5 years ago, that was done last year at Google. You just send in the pixels of this image and the computer says that's a group of young people playing a game of Frisbee. You send in this picture and the computer says, oh, that's a herd of elephants walking across a dry grass field. And we don't really know exactly how the computer did it, because it just learned, from massive amounts of data. We'll hear more again from Nick about a little bit of under the hood of what's involved in this stuff. But I just want to talk about quickly two issues that this raises. So first of all, there are two completely separate issues we should not conflate. There are near-term issues with technology that almost exists right now, and then there are longer-term things about if machines get smarter than us one day, what might happen then. Nick will tell you plenty about the latter. But in the very near term, let's talk about AI weapons a little bit. So our organization recently launched an open letter on autonomous weapons, which was signed by over 20,000 people and about 3,000 of the world's leading robotics and AI researchers. And this open letter was very much inspired by the chemical weapons convention that we heard about from Dita Tsiganikova and the biological weapons convention that we heard about from David Feeks. Why did these researchers sign this? Well, people who go into biology generally want to make the world better. They don't go into it because they want to make bioweapons. People who go into chemistry, they want to make the world better, not to create chem weapons. And it's the same, of course, with these AI researchers. They want to use AI to cure diseases, to help alleviate poverty and do great things, not to figure out new ways of mass murdering people or destabilizing the world. And they feel concerned that their technology that they're building is being bastardized for really destabilizing uses. What are some of these things that these people worry about? Well, for example, today, when drones are used to kill people, it's always a human who makes the decision, who's remote controlling the drone from somewhere, right? But within years, we'll have the technology that we can completely eliminate the human from this. Just have the drone fly around for a few hours, find somebody, use its own AI software, just like that elephant recognizing things, saying, oh, this is the person who looks like it's our enemy, and then have it killed with no human in the loop. A big risk with these things is that if once any superpower goes ahead and mass produces this thing, of course, all other superpowers are going to want to do so too, and we'll have an arms race on our hands. But this arms race, these researchers feel, will be very, very different from the nuclear arms race. Because whereas it's very expensive to build nuclear weapons and very hard to get hold of the materials, these weapons will be incredibly cheap. You don't need any hard to obtain materials. A quadcopter costs a few $100 on Amazon.com today. Software costs nothing once it's developed. And you can have the potential that someone with an axe to grind for under $1,000. Let me back up. If superpowers build this, if you get the arms race going, before long, North Korea is going to decide to build it, and so on and so forth. And before long, some country in the need of cash is going to sell this on the black market, and then all sorts of non-governmental organizations with an axe to grind will have them. And these are perfect weapons for example, assassination. You can program in what your nemesis looks like, have a thing fly for 2 hours, identify the person, kill him, and then self-destruct so no one knows who did it. It's great for ethnic cleansing. You can program these things to look for a certain ethnic group only and kill them. They're very, very cheap. You can imagine swarms of little bumblebee-sized things which just recognize a face, find the eyeball, which is the softest part of the skull, fires a little bullet there, which is very cheap, and you don't need a lot of power, kills people. If you have thousands of those, it would completely transform warfare in a way that's very hard for nations to defend against, other than by creating a police state. And for this reason, there's a quite broad consensus among the researchers in this field that this is an arms race we just shouldn't start. That's the best way to stop it. And I want to just conclude by pointing forward a little bit towards Nick Bostrom, who's going to follow me here, looking at superintelligence. Sometime in the future, maybe in 40 years, maybe in hundreds of years, maybe never, we'll see. There's certainly the possibility that we might make machines that can do everything that we humans can do. And then what? Well, our organization organized the first ever conference of AI researchers to talk not about how to make things smarter, but to talk about this issue in particular, how we can win this race and have wisdom keep pace with the technology. It was in Puerto Rico in January of this year, and it was actually really productive. There was a very strong consensus that emerged that this is something we need to think about. The goal of artificial intelligence should be redefined from having the goal of just creating pure, undirected intelligence towards creating beneficial intelligence. And there was we brainstormed up a very detailed action plan, a list of research projects that should be done that would tackle embarrassing unanswered questions that we need to answer. And it might take decades to answer them, so we should start researching now, not the night before a bunch of guys on Red Bull, switch on their thing. And what was very exciting about this was that Elon Musk was present at the conference, and he said, look, I hear you guys, you want to do this research? Well, let me give you 10 million reasons to do it. And with his donation, we were able to launch a worldwide competition for research ideas. We were overwhelmed by getting 300 teams from around the world putting in wonderful proposals. And it was very painful for the experts who had to review this to pick out winners, but 37 teams have now been selected and have started to work on this. And it is, I think, going to be very, very exciting to keep following how this develops. We view this as just a little bit of seed funding for the wisdom. And I would encourage all of you with resources of governments and big organizations to remember that if we want to win the race between the power of technology and the wisdom with which we manage it, we have to be mindful of the fact that almost all the investments right now just go into making the technology more powerful. There's almost no investment on the wisdom side. So if you're involved with any organization that could help a little bit ramp up this sort of research, you would do humanity a wonderful service. Thank you.
Max, thank you very much for this absolutely inspiring and wonderful presentation. We are now at Uniquely trying to invest in the wisdom side, certainly, and want to have you join us in this.
It consists of a lot of thinkers who love technology, but who, as Cindy Smith very, very eloquently put it here earlier, feel that technology is something not very powerful technological inventions like fire, for instance. We use the strategy of learning from mistakes. We screwed up a bunch of
Upload is ready. Evie, ready?
Yes.
Okay, good. Please operate on patch 1.2 and scan for the latest memory you can find, ideally just before her death.
Understood.
So this is when she died. Hello there, Joanna. What was in your mind when you looked at your shadow? Interesting glitch on the clock. Could be a filtering error. Reconstructing glass from memories. I don't think we'll ever get it right. Maybe someone will figure it out eventually. But it's always going to be a wild guess. Unless we start using discs instead of our brains. Reconstructing glass from memories. I don't think we'll ever get it right. Afternoon light. Didn't she die at night? Lots of missing information here, Evie. This doesn't seem to be the right moment.
Yes. I wasn't able to pinpoint any further coordinates. Objective data is incomplete.
Reasons?
High emotional state.
She might have known she was going to die. Is there enough data to reconstruct a subjective state of the memory?
Yes.
Good. I'll enter the subjective state and see what I can find.
Subjective reconstruction was successful, but I couldn't interpret all data.
It's fine, Evie. Subjective interpretation is tough for any AI, even a special one like you. That ladder goes down to the first floor. That ladder goes down to the first floor. I can't make sense of the sound. I can't make sense of the sound. Could this be her as a child? And the objective, adult version of her isn't represented. Only her shadow. Could mean so many things.
It belongs somewhere in the memory, but I cannot interpret it. I need to know what it is and where it belongs.
All right, I'll study it and put it in the right place.
Processing. I can't interpret the new raw data, but the readings are the opposite of chaotic. They have a constant, rhythmic pattern. You can use the raw data interpretation interface to find where it might belong.
Evie, do a match with clock data at this spot.
Processing. I read uninterpreted data somewhere in the subjective state, at night.
A picture of a dog. Following her?
Reminder. At your discretion, I can momentarily free memory and processing power to deliver more accurate feedback. Processing. I can't interpret the new raw data, but the spikes in the readings suggest an intense, violent moment.
A spider web. No way out. A spider web. No way out.
Processing. I can't interpret the new raw data, but the spikes in the readings suggest an intense, violent moment. Processing. I can't interpret the new raw data, but the spikes in the readings suggest an intense, violent moment.
A spider web. No way out. No mirror. The water is running. Seems close. Maybe in the objective state. Seems close. Maybe in the objective state.
Processing. I can't interpret the new raw data, but the spikes in the readings suggest an intense, violent moment.
Maybe this is the right moment. The water is running.
The raw data should work here.
Evie, do a match right here with a mirror being violently broken. water is running. What is this hand doing here? You were right, Tom. She wasn't alone. Should be good enough evidence to keep him satisfied for now.
Should I shut down the simulation?
Please, go ahead.
Understood. Shutting down in 3, 2, 1.
Hey, Russell. Any good news?
It wasn't a clear reconstruction, but I managed to get some objective evidence. There was a clear hand next to her, just when she was lying on her bed, and the pills were all over the floor. So it seems you may be right. There was definitely somebody with her.
A hand. That's all you could find.
Well, Tom, I'm just getting started. Her last memories are fuzzy, and that's probably because of the psychological stress she was under. The fact that she wasn't alone is a good start.
Yeah, good to know. But we need to know who it was so we can do something about it.
I'll keep looking, Tom. Let's just hope the rest of the memories are in better shape.
I hope so. Did you find anything else?
I saw a lot of other things. I just need to understand her unconscious better.
It's fine, Russell. Just keep looking, but I need something else from you. We need to get into her private email. The password. We were able to hack the words, but there are 3 numbers at the start that we don't know. We have only a few shots at this, so that's why I need you.
Her password? I'd like to avoid that.
Listen, Russell, we're here precisely to avoid tech industry fuck-ups like in the past, and finding the password is aligned with that goal.
You're here because of that. My research had nothing to do with all of it.
Russell, just send us the scan and inspection report as legally required, and there will be no issues, I promise. We're counting on you for this one. The password ends with Namahs. Namahs, but it's preceded by 3 numbers. We have 3 to 4 tries with this password at most, so when you have something, call me.
It's not that simple. There are major consequences.
I'll wait for your call. Bye, Russell.
Damn it.